Okay, 1, 2, 3. Great.
Please get a couple further.
Thank you so much.
Just very quickly, on behalf of New Haven PASE, which is the Filipino American Society for Education, a group that has been in existence since 1989 here in New Haven Unified, as well as the New Haven Equity Council. I thank you for passing this every year. I also invite everyone to our event on October 22nd at the Union City Library. The City of Union City is also passing a proclamation that evening, so thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for that information. Next, we have 3 presentations. The first one is going to be 6.2 on student achievement update. Scott Zani.
Good evening, President Carr, members of the board, and Superintendent Thompson. It's my pleasure this evening to be able to provide information in regards to the 2018-2019 Student Achievement Update for New Haven Unified School District. Our work really being grounded in our district goals, those again being college and career and life ready, equity and access, and engagement and personalization. This year, what we've done a little bit differently than what we've done in years past is what we've done is to create a composite resource with data tables and information that's linked to the top of this presentation. So all of the tables and facts and all of the data to support our talking point shared tonight are here and accessible to both you and the public as part of the supporting documentation for tonight's presentation to you. The way that we would like to begin our presentation this evening is to first begin to think about, there we go, the actions from 2018 and 2019. Last year, many strands of work occurred, those including our work in K through 8th grade around our multi-tier systems of support for academic, behavioral, and social-emotional learning support for our students. We also provided professional development very intentionally around designated and integrated ELD, as well as launched our ELA and ELD curriculum in our K-8 schools, Wonders in K-5 and Collections in grades 6 through 8. We also focused on providing support in terms of universal design for learning professional development to ensure that all students have access to grade level content curriculum, as well as embarked upon our journey to begin to infuse next generation science standard instructional materials into our system. Last year, we were identified as a district receiving differentiated assistance from the Alameda County Office of Education, focusing on the support of our homeless students in our district, as well as embarked in work that was provided to us through resources in the Student Success and Academic Enrichment Grant, SSAE, which allowed us to focus on supporting visual performing arts, positive behavior supports intervention, trauma-informed practices, as well as working with the Union City Family Center and Logan High School Health Center, collaborating and articulating services and integrating services throughout our system. Last year was also a year where we were involved with federal program monitoring from the state of California, as well as being involved with 2 WASC accreditation visits, one being at James Logan High School and the second being at Dakota School for Independent Study. So with those strands of work that we engaged in over the course of last year, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive, and I would like to introduce to you Hui Stevens, the Director of K-12 Instruction.
Good evening.
I'm here to present a few updates and slides regarding our progress with English learners. Our English learner master plan that was board approved is closely aligned to the California roadmap for English learners. And the principles and the core components are aligned in the main focus areas. Mr. Pisani already outlined the areas of our instructional materials that will leverage our students' learning and align to Common Core standards. A strong emphasis and focus around staff professional development to build teacher efficacy and providing best practices and support for our English learner population, and also aligning that to our instructional programs, really focusing on articulation and alignment of services and access for our students, and creating additional language pathways. I was just here not too long ago presenting Spanish dual immersion program and looking at additional programs such as the Mandarin immersion program. So for ways for students to build on their assets and acquire new languages to be ready for their global economy. The other area of focus, and which is a core component, is building parent partnership. And I would like to share that we have created many opportunities for our parents to partner at school sites in multiple ways, from our ELAC committees, English Learner Advisory Committees at this site, as well as workshops focused on parent-designated topics and other opportunities, such as our District Advisory English Learner Committee, which we have improved the parent partnership from 10 to 50 parent partnership last school year, so that was quite a bit of success for us. And how we mainly monitor our English learner success is growth on their academic achievement, as well as our reclassification rate for our English learners, in which they demonstrate language proficiency. And this number shows our trend of students, or a number of our students that have met the reclassification criteria in the last 5 years. And really want to focus and call out 2016 and 17, where we had over 500 students reclassify in grades K through 12, really due to teacher efforts around focus on English learner skills and the curriculum that supports our English learners as well. And we've maintained a healthy percentage in our reclassification in the last 2 years, approximately 12 to 13%. Okay. So now I'd like to introduce Director of Pupil Services, Marcus Lamb, to present the next set of slides. Thank you.
Can we ask questions for?
Maybe let's hold off at the end, yeah.
Good evening, President Carr, members of the school board, and Superintendent Thompson. Tonight, I'm here to present data from 2018-2019 as it relates to discipline and attendance. As you can see by the arrow on the left, last year in New Haven, we actually dropped in the number of suspensions that we had by 28.7%, and what that equates to is a drop of 134 suspensions. In 2017-18, we had 459 total suspensions. Last year, we dropped to 325. Last year also marked the 4th year in a row that our elementary and high schools continued their decline in the number of suspensions. And the big change from last year is our middle schools, who declined by 100 suspensions. Last year they did spike up from the previous year, and so they reversed that trend and dropped significantly. I highlighted the drop of 47.6% of our homeless population, which is a reduction of 21 student suspensions to 11. And I highlighted that because, as Mr. Pisani pointed out earlier, we were called out by the Alameda County to be in differentiated assistance, which means they wanted to, we needed to serve our homeless population a little bit better. As you can see, our special education suspensions also went up from 56 to 86 students, which is 53.6%. And our African American students with IEPs also increased by 33.3%. And again, I'm highlighting the African American special education students because the California Department of Education noticed that we had a disproportionate number of these category students. And Director of Special Services, Sarah Kapler, will be speaking to that in a moment. On this next slide, I wanted to inform you that last year we did increase the number of students expelled by 4 students from 11 to 15. The majority of our expulsions were mandatory expulsions, which means the education code violations that students violated required us, or it made it mandatory for us to recommend an expulsion. So out of the 15 expulsions, 13 of them were mandatory recommendations. We did reduce the number of expulsions of African American and Latino students from 10 to 7 last year. And if we wanted to look at where our difference was, we expelled 2 more elementary students compared to the previous year, and 2 more high school students compared to the previous year. And as you can see, last year in terms of attendance, we did drop 6.7% to 88.50%, which means on an average 88.5% of our students showed up for school each day. I just do want to point out that this is unusual because normally we are closer to 95%, but because of the teacher strike last year, it did affect our overall ADA. But on a positive, our attendance rates through May 17th, we were actually on the increase in terms of being 0.13% higher than the year before. So on May 17th, we actually ended it. Our attendance rate was at 95.33%. I would now like to turn the microphone over to our Director of Special Services, Sarah Kapler.
Good evening, members of the board, President Carr and Superintendent Thompson. I'm going to be reviewing our special education data today. And as you've seen in years past, despite our declining enrollment as a district, our special education population remains relatively steady. Also, as you've seen in the past, there are 14 indicators that California Department of Education particularly pays attention to. You'll see some in light purple. Those are the indicators from 2 years ago. And the ones in dark purple are the ones they're focused on this year. As we look at those indicators, 1, 2, and 5, those are graduation rate, our dropout rate, and our least restrictive environment, in other words, where we serve students with special needs. We have actually met those, targets. Looking at our new indicators, starting with indicator 6, which is preschool least restrictive environment. So again, where we serve our preschool students. Prior to this year, we only had the ability to serve preschool students in our special day classes, not having any sort of general ed options. However, I'm pleased to announce that starting actually on Tuesday, we are going to be working with one collaboration with Cadango Preschool to co-teach at Guy Emmanuel. So we're excited about that option for our preschool students. And you'll also see and have heard from Mr. Lamb that we did not meet the disproportionality indicators. Those are students who have an IEP and are identified as African American for any discipline, and also in less than 10 days. So this continues to be a trend for the 4th year in a row. However, California has re-benched how they calculate disproportionality. So many districts in our area are disproportionate, and it is true for all 3 districts in our SELPA for different areas. In particularly, New Haven has not met the indicator for students with an IEP who are African American in the category of other health impaired, and in how we discipline, how often we're disciplining those students. So what are we doing about these things? Let me catch up with my notes here. So what are we doing about this? So last year we engaged in work groups around the district. We have engaged in communication with our guiding coalition and our site leaders. And some key recommendations surfaced. Professional development through the SELPA for our administrators, social emotional support at all sites, and involvement of our parent stakeholder groups such as the District African American Advisory Group or the Community Advisory Committee, which is our special education families. Okay. I'd like to introduce you to Tracy Noriega, our Director of K-12 Instruction, for the next part.
Good evening again, Superintendent Thompson, President Carr, members of the board, everyone here and everyone at home. I'll be speaking to you tonight about our work on personalized learning. As you know, personalization is one of our strategies towards the goal of high-quality education for all students. According to author and creative learning strategist Barbara Bray, personalized learning means that learning starts with the learner. Learning is tailored to the individual needs of each learner instead of by age or grade level. It is more than teaching to one-size-fits-all or just moving to learner-centered learning and changing instruction. Personalized learning takes a holistic view of the individual, skill levels, interests, strengths, and challenges, and prior knowledge. The learner owns their own learning. So it's really about the shift in the classroom in terms of what we traditionally may have thought of the teacher's role and the student's role. Now, prior to specific support in personalized learning using the Core 4, which I'll get to in the next slide, there are already things happening to support personalized learning. For example, the tenets of ethnic studies and culturally responsive pedagogy, literacy strategies via guided reading and writer's workshop, student talk, and academic discourse. This also extends to the work we do with our families via our FSAs and the Union City Family Center. Now, some folks were of the thought that the use of technology equated personalized learning. Using specific programs leveled to a student is one way, but personalized learning is more than just that. This graphic of the Core 4 is what we have been using to guide personalized learning planning and practice. Targeting instruction for students based on their needs in comparison to the California standards, using frequent student data to inform instruction, incorporating reflection as a common practice and thinking about how various materials, delivery methods are used for that targeted instruction. The last few years, we have had personalized learning summits consisting of workshops given by teachers for teachers. In 2016-17, we had a teacher on special assignment who worked specifically with teachers on implementing personalized learning strategies, including project-based learning. The last 2 years, Education Elements supported a few elementary sites with understanding and implementing the Core 4 in their classrooms. I know Mr. Pisani will talk about our plans for this year a little later, so with that, I will turn it back over to Mr. Pisani, our Chief Academic Officer.
In continuing with data points, the next set of data points relates to our textbook adoption and implementation update. As you know, every year we continue to move toward Common Core alignment. In the last year, we moved in our elementary schools to adopt ELA, ELD curriculum, both collections at the middle school and wonders at the elementary school, as well as for our two-way dual immersion class with Maravillas, being the curriculum which we have put in place for our students as well. At our high schools, they continue to work through the development of their rigorous curriculum design units and have worked to be able to ingrain both ELA and ELD standards within their rigorous curriculum design units. And then in the area of science, we've started the process of being able to secure NGSS Common Core aligned materials. This year we will be piloting 2 different sets. In the fall trimester, our middle school teachers are implementing units in Impact, and in the winter they will be implementing in STEM Scopes, and in the spring they will be making a recommendation to you in terms of what materials to adopt in our middle schools for NGSS aligned curricular materials. In terms of our graduation rate for the district, again, the arrows demonstrate our progress compared to our rates of graduation last year. So for the district as a whole, James Logan High School as well as Dakota School for Independent Study, there were increases in the graduation rate compared to the previous year. As this district as a whole, the percentage of change, we increased by 2.94% and 89.51% being the graduation rate. And at James Logan High School, an increase of 0.69 to 93%. Connolly Carabello had a bit of a regression in their graduation rate and is going to be an area of focus in their single plans for student achievement, which you're going to be seeing in a couple of weeks. And Dakota School for Independent Study actually had a very dramatic increase in the graduation rate. It's rare that you would see an increase of over 10%, and Dakota increased by 14% compared to last year for their graduation rate now to be at 54.17%. And while this is a dramatic increase, Dakota is still identified as being in CSI, Comprehensive Support and Intervention, because for more than 2 consecutive years, their graduation rate has been under 75%. They've developed a specific plan in terms of the resources that have been given to them from Alameda County in order to specifically target and provide professional development and support to increase the graduation rate, the continuing graduation rate increase of Dakota for this year and into the future. In terms of AP and college tests taken this year for the first time, go ahead. We actually received a pretty comprehensive analysis from College Board, which we've linked to the top of this slide and have made accessible to the public, which has lots of data tables and information. Most specifically in regards to advanced placement, pages 5 through 9 of this report has comparative data in lots of different data sets. It also includes information in terms of PSAT and SAT in New Haven as well. But some of the most salient points, if I can condense them down into talking points, being that 651 students last year took one AP test or more. You can go back. Nope, no problem. 1,173 tests were administered because sometimes students take more than one AP test. And of that, 795 tests scored a 3 or higher on the AP test. Some interesting data trends that you're going to see in this analysis from College Board. In New Haven, female students scored 3 or higher on the AP test comparatively to our male students. Our Asian and Hispanic students comprise the largest population of students in our school district, and they also take the AP test and score 3 or higher at a greater percentage. Last year in New Haven, we offered 30 different AP tests to our students. And the tests that were most frequently taken were in the areas of English language composition, world history, calculus AB, and biology. You can go back to the slide there. There we go. The last data point I'd like to share for you is something that is new that was released from the California Department of Ed, which deals with college-going rates. This is new data, and it looks at data in 4 different lenses. One is the percentage of students who graduated last school year and actually enrolled in college. The way this graphic is organized is you look at it by columns from the left to the right. So the percentage you can see for New Haven exceeds that of both the county as well as the state in terms of the percentage of students enrolling in college. The second column is the degree that enrolled in state. And again, in-state enrollment for college, New Haven exceeded both the county and the state in terms of in-state college enrollment. Out-of-state enrollment, for New Haven, our students are least frequent in enrolling out-of-state compared to the county and to the state. And then for no record of college enrollment, New Haven's percentage is less than both the county and the state in terms of the percentage of students not enrolled in college. These are data points which will create a baseline for us to be able to continue to analyze these trends in data for our students as they leave New Haven. And so with that, lots of information. In a subsequent presentation, John Matos will provide information in terms of our SBAC student results as well as the California dashboard. SBAC was just publicly released. We're in the process of analyzing that data. And the California dashboard will be released, we anticipate, in December. And we will prepare that information to provide to you in a separate presentation. So with that, we look forward to the future. So in looking at 1920, based on our data and in what has been included in our local control accountability plan, those things that we've identified as priority initiatives, we look at a lens and we say, why are we doing what we're doing? The priority initiatives this year are based in either grant-funded activities, that they are mandated by the state of California, that it was an outcome from our federal program monitoring. It was a recommendation from WASC from either James Logan High School or Dakota, or it's required through Alameda County, or through board policy and regulations, we're implementing activities during this year. So with that, kind of circling back to our 3 district goals. So this year under College and Career Ready, some of the things that we're focusing on is we received the K-12 Low Performing Schools Block Grant, And with that, focusing in the area of mathematics for this upcoming year based upon an analysis of our student test results from previous years. We're also going to, again, pilot instructional materials in middle school science and create units in physical education in grades 9 through 12 to ensure that they meet all of the state mandates. Implement the ELA, ELD rigorous curriculum design and implementing designated ELD. When we look to equity and access, again, being able to focus on the activities related to our differentiated assistance for our homeless students and those activities to support them. In K through 8, our continuing development around our multi-tier systems of support, where last year we focused on foundations and engineering of MTSS. This year we're focusing on structuring and implementing MTSS, as well as continuing professional development around universal design for learning to ensure equitable access for all students to grade level curriculum, as well as our equity councils and grading and assessment task force. And then in the areas of engagement and personalization, continuing to develop and being able to provide support for implementing PBIS, positive behavior and intervention support for students, our social emotional curriculum starting in grades K1 with Kamochis, as well as trauma-informed practices and professional development. And then continuing with our outreach in terms of family and community engagement through our collaboration and articulation with the Union City Family Center and our outreach into our community, as well as our efforts to support personalized learning with our collaboration with Ed Elements. And so with that, I would like to be able to thank all of the members of the Division of Teaching and Learning who helped to prepare for this presentation tonight, and we'd like to entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Scott. That was a lot of information, so I will open it up for any comments or questions or discussion.
No, my questions were answered.
Okay. Anything from our students? No?
When you're talking about like suspension rates, is it like counting only one person, or is it multiple suspensions within one person?
So the suspension numbers that I presented tonight are just the individual incidents. So out of the 325 we talked about last year, several of those could have been by an individual student who may have had multiple suspensions.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wong, anything?
Oh, yes. I mean, yeah, I like the presentations, and that's the first time we can see very well for the college going rates, and we did pretty good. And I have some suggestions, and for the last category, and for no record college enrollment, about the 24.7%. That's a huge amount, and can we doing some more follow-up and what's going on to study? And yeah, the other thing said is in out-of-state college enrollments, and we think and the counselor and the school and make sure they invited some kind of college coming, maybe more promote the students. I think we're capable. I mean, we're the performance above the state, the average of the state, above the average state, and we definitely, I mean, have more students be interested in going to out-of-state. Yeah. Very good job, yeah.
Thank you.
It could also mean that we have great schools in California that students just want to stay local and save the out-of-the-state tuition as well.
We cannot deny that California,
Yeah.
we have good school, but the East Coast.
Certainly a different
traditionally,
experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ms. Chima?
Yeah, pretty good information. So similar to the slide 22, I would like to see the New Haven on the top numbers. Maybe not out of the state because I love California. That's fine. But I was looking for I was just thinking that because I'm a number person, so why our district is showing on the bottom lines in the last two columns, then I understand that. So maybe in the future if we can make improvement, all of us, we need to work together.
I'm sorry, Ms. Chima, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, I think I was not speaking on the on the slide 22.
Which slide is that, if I could?
Yeah, this is the one you have it on.
Okay.
Right. So I see the New Haven School District logo on the right two columns. It's in the bottom. I would like to see it on the top too.
If I could refer to the no record of college enrollment, that percentage is the lowest compared to both the county and to the state, meaning that more of our students have enrolled in college compared to the county and to the state.
You want them there.
Oh, I see. Hold on. I think I got the, yeah.
Yeah.
No, maybe the third column,
Yes.
out of state.
Yeah,
So
that's the
I-
one
I have
Member
experience
Wong
too,
just
right,
kind
yeah.
of touched on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, Member Kenlis?
Yeah, I'm going back to the reclassification information. I just have a few questions. The data we're showing, 1,764 reclassified the last 5 years. I have a few questions related to that. Yeah. Does it show, are those from the 5th grade mainly, specifically, or are those long-term learners from high school, or a mixture of different grades?
Depending on the year, the last 2 years are trends for the highest reclassification resides in grades 4, 5, and 8 of the grade level spans.
Okay, and then regarding the decrease in 2018-19, is that because most of them have been reclassified and we have lesser students in the program?
Our English learner population have decreased due to reclassification and also due to enrollment. We used to have approximately 4,000 English learners approximately 5 years ago, and now we're serving about 2,300 English learners. And the reduction of reclassification is exactly, one part is what you mentioned, is when you have a high number of English learners reclassify the following years in terms of language proficiency, it takes a couple of more years.
Right.
And in addition to that, last year was unique as we transitioned from self-assessment to the LPAC assessment. That is more Common Core aligned.
Right.
So it's a different assessment we're asking our students to take. And last year was our benchmark year for that.
Right, so they have not seen it before.
Correct.
Are the people or students reclassified this year or last year specifically from the grade school or high school, or both?
Well, again, the highest, the last 2 years, if I look at the trend, the highest number of reclassification falls in 4th, 5th, and 8th grade.
Okay, do we have some in the high school that are still not reclassified?
We do. At the high school level, we do support two populations that I would consider our most fragile students within our English learner population. One set of students are our newcomer students, students that have arrived in our country and our educational system less than 2 years.
Right.
And the other is our long-term English learners. Once they pass 6 years, they become identified as long-term English learners, and is much more difficult at a high school level.
Right.
So looking at articulation and support and prevention services, focusing on our elementary and middle school efforts is how we prevent the long-term English learners.
Right.
We currently serve approximately 90% of the 500 students at James Logan are long-term English learners.
Did you say 500?
500.
500.
Yes.
Wow. That's a huge number for long-term.
It is, yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, so a lot of the efforts that Mr. Bazzani highlighted in terms of finding appropriate instructional materials that are Common Core aligned, providing professional development, focusing our efforts in teaching strategies and support, have made a lot of progress, but we want to assure that elementary and middle school is an area of emphasis
Right,
for
yeah,
us.
my concern is the long term.
Absolutely.
Because they've been there for a while.
Yes, they have.
And my other question related to that is, do they get additional support in other classes that are not English if they're still long-term learners? I mean, the academic language in math, science, and social studies could be a little bit daunting.
Yes, Logan has multiple selections for English learners to select. There are English learner designated content courses that really focus on language and rich instruction. And we also have every English learner, they're offered a academic literacy course that focus on language acquisition specifically.
Okay, thank you so much for the work you guys are doing. I really appreciate the report on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just have one last question.
I have-
So
few more questions.
Oh, you
to
do, I'm sorry,
but
go
you
ahead.
could go
That's
and
okay. My only question was, what's the typical time frame for someone to be reclassified? How many years? 6 years? And has that improved? Because I know we were looking at some PD last year or even earlier this year. Do you anticipate that number to drop down to maybe 5 or eventually lower?
Yeah, that has improved because our highest reclassification rate are in 4th grade and 5th grade. And typically, our students enroll with us in either TK or kindergarten. And the time frame for them to be reclassified in an ideal situation is by 5th grade. In 6th grade, they're considered long-term English learners for the most part.
Okay.
So because of our increase in reclassification, those specific grade levels, our elementary teachers are doing a great job in really addressing our English learner needs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can continue
Yeah,
with
my
your
next question is pertaining suspension. I know you mentioned, I think I heard you mention that these are required reporting as far as the county is concerned because they were supporting us in these areas. Is that about right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
The report you produce is addressed because these are the categories that the county is asking us to produce because we need to address the help that they're supporting, giving to us.
Yes, the county did for the
Right.
homeless population.
So my question is, what about the other demographics? Are there any requests or are there any higher suspension or lower suspension rates happening in the other demographics that are not showing here? That this county is not asking us to report on, but we might want to know?
Sure. We have other groups that I think we could improve on. Our African American suspension rates are also disproportionate. As I pointed out, our special education and our African American special education. I think one of the things we learned from working with the county in addressing our homeless population is that one thing we did with our homeless population last year is that we went to each of the sites and we actually worked with our sites and identified and talked about the students and talked about what are the interventions, what are the things we can do for these students to support them. And I think using that model, it seemed to be successful, and we're going to be expanding that we called them road shows. And so we're going to be going to the sites and working specifically with our admin to focus on our African American students, our African American special education students, and trying to figure out what are some interventions, what are some ways that we could really focus on supporting these students who our data says we've struggled to support.
Right, I don't think I asked my question right. I know this is the data you gave us. My question is specifically, are there other demographics such as the Spanish, the Filipinos, Asian groups that are showing an increase or decrease in suspension? That was my question. I see these, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I don't have it off the top of my head and to present it, but I know it's attached to the data sheet, to the composite data links. So what I did is I presented the data, and at the bottom of the spreadsheet, it is we do have suspensions and expulsions broken down by our different subgroups.
For some reason, I don't have that. Do I have that?
It's a hyperlink within the PowerPoints.
And sometimes
So
the
it'd be
hyperlink doesn't work. It doesn't give us access. I think maybe you are the admins, and I try to touch those.
We'll have to take a look at that to make sure the links work.
Okay.
It should work.
I just did not see it in my attachment here. So, okay, that's what I was interested about, seeing the other groups to see if they have increased or decreased in the suspension rates. But thank you. If I could, I probably could download it from the state. Or
No, we'll
No,
make
we
sure you
should
have
be able
it.
to.
There's what was covered in about 20 minutes here incorporates massive
I saw
amounts of
that,
data.
yeah.
So you actually have a sheet that has all of the data
Okay.
detailed.
Yeah.
And if
So I'll
you
make sure,
can't access it,
I'll make sure you have access to that.
All right.
Yeah.
and you can dig in and look
Oh,
for any.
here.
oh, the other attachment. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I got it now.
Yeah, that'll link you to there. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, there's hundreds of pages of
Okay,
data that you
that's-
can pour through.
That's fine. So that is the good news, though, that we do have a decrease in let me just go back to it, and overall suspension of negative 28.7, so that's good to know. And I think I have one more question. Well, I'll just check the attachment, because they're very
Yeah, there is a
detailed
lot of.
questions.
If you have additional
Yeah.
question, just
Yeah.
email
Yeah.
after you look at
Yeah.
that attachment. I think
Yeah.
that would be more beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, our next presentation is on LCAP, local indicator presentation, also by Scott Pisani.
Good evening. We're going to present information in terms of the California Dashboard Local Indicators, and with that, I'd like to introduce John Matos.
Good evening, President Carr, members of the board, Superintendent Thompson. As soon as the presentation starts, I'll be doing an update on the local indicators for the LCAP, as Mr. Pisani said. In terms of the LCFF statute, there's a number of priority areas that the state is interested in looking at that they don't necessarily collect data at the state level. And so what they do is they ask districts to collect that data at the district level. And they have created a self-assessment tool that districts are to use to collect that district level data and make the determinations if they've met those local indicators, and really to use that to support whether or not they did or didn't. There are 5 local indicators: basic conditions, implementation of state academic standards, parent engagement, school climate, and access to a broad curriculum. And what the state requires is that for every district to do this self-assessment, to present that information to the board, and then to upload that information to the state. And so we have completed our self-assessment. We are tonight, I'm doing a very short presentation on those local indicators, and then we'll be uploading this information to the state. Okay? And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. The first local indicator is basic conditions, and that includes a number of different areas in terms of hiring. So making sure that we have staff who are appropriately credentialed for English learners, making sure we have as few misassignments and vacant positions as possible. We have a couple, but a relatively small number. It also looks at our instructional materials as kind of measured by that Williams Act to make sure that all students have access to instructional materials, and also looks at our facilities, especially through that lens of if there's any Williams facilities complaints. The second is the implementation of state academic standards, and we have done that self-assessment and found some areas of strength. And that mostly being in our English language arts, our English language development, and our math, in which we have pretty darn close to full implementation. There are some areas that we need to focus on. Our next generation science standards are definitely, we're in the beginning stages of that. And in terms of our history and social science, we're really in and probably close to the first stages of making sure those are being implemented. Do I click? Okay. The third is parent engagement. As we know, as you know, that we survey our parents, we survey our students every year. For our parent engagement, we have found that 97% of our students either agree or strongly agree that they feel welcome in their child's school, with 34% of that 97% strongly agreeing. Our intent is to increase that rate by 2% annually. And so we met that one. In terms of school climate, again, students are also surveyed and how and if they feel safe. 86% of our students reported that they did feel safe at school, which was up from last year. And our goal is to increase that number also by 2% annually. And finally, access to a broad course of study. New Haven very purposefully has worked to eliminate barriers for students so they can access all areas of our content and curriculum. We track that through the use of our student information system, our course catalog, and our master schedules. And what we do notice and what we do know is that although we do have open access K-12, we do need to continue to put some attention and some effort into making sure that our underrepresented populations get into those AP classes, take those AP tests and score a 3 or higher. So those are the 5 local indicators as needed by the LCAP. There's a link to a little bit more of a comprehensive report. This is what we're actually going to be presenting or uploading to the state, hopefully tomorrow. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Starting from our student board members? None? Okay. None?
No.
Okay. Do you have any
Just,
questions?
thank you for providing this information to us. So the survey data you said that we have 97% participation, but it also depends upon how many parents they participate, they actually take the survey.
Sure.
So can you share that information?
You know what, I actually don't have the number off the top of my head. I know it's significant, but I don't have the number of actual responses. But that's something
Maybe
we
you
can put together.
Provide us later on. I mean, if small percentage of parents they participate, then they can, because they're active parents, they can say, yeah, we are satisfied. So we need to expand that number of people who participate.
I think anecdotally, I believe that number is quite high, but we can get that number.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to commend our district, the staff and everyone for meeting, for having the MET category. So thank you, staff, students, and everyone who worked. I think everybody here contributed making that happen. And also for indicating what you will be doing although it's already met, to improve. For example, priority 2, you have indicated your areas of focus and what you would be doing in the future. But it is already met. That doesn't mean we stop. We keep going. So congratulations. Thank you. Let's keep it at MET.
Yes, keep them met.
And continue
We just need to
that
get them
direction.
uploaded before November 1st, and we'll be met on the dashboard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, our last presentation is the update on the district's budget and finances. Ms. Heldman.
Okay. Good evening, Superintendent Thompson and members of the board. While we are waiting for, I think it's almost ready. So at the last Excel sheet, but this is modeled after the state, which is the SACS model or the state software. Like I said, there's a lot of numbers here, but what we want to look into this, and they're very tiny, but we did some identification in terms of where we want the focus to be in terms of tonight's discussion. So, you know what, I'm going to fast forward to something, and then we can go back to that. You've seen this graphic before. This is the budget cycle that we follow. So if this was a directional map, this is the current budget of record right now, which is the budget that you adopted in June. Why I'm pointing this out is, again, that's the budget of record because that's what's approved by the board. However, since June, there were 2 major things that happened. One of them is we've settled, right? So if you recall, when we presented for adoption the adopted budget, we did explicitly say, to make sure everyone was clear on it, that it did not include the ongoing cost of the settlement, given the timing of when all of that happened. So keeping that in mind. So what has happened? Let me go back to the first screen. So what has happened since? So we settled with our employee groups, and we've also closed the books. We presented the unaudited actuals to you in September. So what this does is we took the multi-year projection in June and embedded those 2 things, those 2 major things that's happened since June. So what I wanted to point out in this particular spreadsheet are the bottom line. This is how we look at it. And again, keeping in mind, this follows the structure of the state. cost or the ongoing impact of the settlements for all employee groups. And now that we've closed the books, we actually have an actual ending balance, no longer an estimated ending balance. We're looking at, on the third out year, $11.3 million deficit. Now, this is if we don't do anything, right? If we keep the numbers based on the revenues from the state and the expenses as they were in June, this is what it's going to look like. I wanted to point out at the right corner, just additional information, is the 1920 budget, as you may recall, included $3.5 million in expenditure reductions. So now, this is if we don't do anything, if we kept it as it is, and if there are no substantive changes in terms of state revenue factors. This one, we've wiped that out, right? This is if we address that concern in the next 2 years. So comparing this and this, you have these things, right? So how are we going to, I mean, I can balance any budget by just plugging a number here and there, but we all know that's not how it works. It has to be based on sound reasoning, and it has to be defensible based on the information that we get from the state. So in order to make this way, because I cannot produce or I cannot present a budget like this to the Alameda County Office of Education, because our budget will not be certified if it was presented with the negative 11.3. So we actually identify placeholders in our multi-year projection, and this is that placeholder. For the purpose of this presentation, what we are saying is, if we reduce this line item, and this line item are in contracts and services, if we reduce it from the current year, reducing it to by $3.5 million in the out year and another $3.5 million in the out year, we would have a balanced budget for 3 years. Now, keeping in mind, this is simply the adopted multi-year with the 2 major changes since June. Now, it's going to change. How is it going to change? We will get our actual CalPATS numbers, and we will be refining those projections now that September payroll has actually happened, and other decisions that have been made since June. So keeping in mind, we are working on first interim, and that will be presented to you in December, and you will see an updated projection for the next 3 years. So this is a graphic that shows, our reality. What do we deal with? What do we look at? So in addressing that fiscal sustainability for the district, we have to address both areas, our expenses, and find ways to enhance or augment our revenues. So we know we have a problem. What have we done so far in trying to mitigate that problem? So in 1819, we adopted that budget with $3.7 million in reductions. Mid-year, actually, we added to it. We had discussions and meetings and identified an additional nearly $700,000 in reduction. I mentioned earlier that the 1920 actually includes $3.5 million in expenditure reductions. So we've not done nothing. We've done certain things on the expenditure side. So now this is the other side of that equation, right? This is the revenues part of it. And this actually would be a transition to the next part of this presentation, but let's talk about this area. So the first 2 areas actually are things that we can do, and they kind of go hand in hand together, and we're putting in place things that could help us with that. At the last board meeting, you all recall the presentation by Ms. Stevens with regards to the Mandarin Dual Immersion Program. So those are the things that we are putting in place in order to grow that enrollment, and work that's happening in order to market those programs that we hope to attract those students, right? Meal application campaign, why that's important? That has a direct correlation with our LCFF revenues. That, as you know, unduplicated pupil percentage is one of the components that actually plays a big role in the calculation of our state revenues. So this, for months now, we have been working with our site principals, our food service management, and our UCFC and our family service assistants to help us in terms of providing guidance and encouraging families to apply for the to complete the meal application, and again, providing help and reaching out to them and tracking the intake of these applications. So the last two, again, we're talking about revenues, are the second part of this presentation, which actually are options in terms of different ways or other ways that we could enhance our revenues or establish a mechanism by which we could have a stream of unrestricted revenues. So of course, that could be in the form of a local parcel tax and in the form of a local general obligation bond, but not just a local a typical general obligation bond like we have in this one. As we have presented other information on this, it's a GO bond that actually embeds an employee housing component in it. We can skip that. So going back to the, are we going to leave an $11.3 million problem in the second out year or not? We all know we can't pass a budget with any of those years that are not balanced. So we set up a plan in terms of how we're going to do that and engage our stakeholders, and how are we going to get there, knowing that we have some statutory deadlines as far as the state and the county is concerned. So this draft timeline for prioritization and budget development process was also shared with the Budget and Finance Committee. And this is what we are, it's like our roadmap in accomplishing that in the next coming months. So one of the other items that the committee requested to be presented tonight is a comparison of those two options in terms of a future ballot initiative. So as you can see, we've compared them side by side, a local parcel tax measure versus a GO bond. And I will not read those, but I will certainly entertain questions after this. What's not in the screen, actually, there are other differences too. Comparing those two things, it's not just the threshold or the dates and the use of the proceeds. One of the things that actually had a really good discussion at the committee, if I may share so, is that typically parcel taxes have an end date, they have a sunset date, whereas the employee housing component or the rental revenue from the employee housing component once built could be, of course, in perpetuity, right? Because the building's there. So that's not in here, but I just want to point out that that's another change. Now, we had a question in terms of, do parcel taxes have to have a sunset date? Actually, they don't have to. The thing is, in the 90s, there were actually some parcel taxes that were evergreen, as they were referred to. I would want to point out the last comparative here is that this district has attempted in the past, in 2011 and 2012, a local parcel tax measure, and both have failed. So just keeping that in mind in terms of our track record with regards to that, and in considering whether should it have a sunset date or not, that would be very good information to take note of. And this is another side-by-side comparison in terms of data of passage between a GO bond and a parcel tax measure. This is a timeline, and you've seen this before. It was actually presented by our financial advisor in terms of the two election dates that are upcoming. And so, as you can see, it has the tasks and when ideally it should be taking place. And we're talking about either the March primaries or the November general election. That is highlighted because in a later agenda item, the recommendation from the Budget and Finance Committee actually is to consider or to choose the November general election cycle. And I believe that ends my presentation. I can answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ms. Heldman. Any questions from the student board members first? None? Okay. Member Nishihara?
Go ahead. No?
Okay. Member Wong?
I have a couple of questions, and number one, okay, so, and then your information to give us regarding the parcel tax, we have a 0 out of 2 succeed ratio in New Haven School District, is right?
Correct.
And, but in the counties, and we have a 78% passed. For the Alameda County, we have a 50 parcel tax.
Yes.
Okay, and do you know why, and maybe the language, or why caused the failed? Yeah.
Well, it's a higher threshold to begin with to pass a parcel tax. I mean, 2/3 rather than a Prop 39, which you could do a GO bond, which is only 55%. So that plays a big role in it. But definitely, to your point, the ballot language also, that is your language, that is your presentation to your community in terms of what you will use those dollars for. So if a survey was not done, or if the community was not pulsed in terms of what is important or the priorities of that community, that also could play a role in terms of the success or the failure of the measure.
Okay, and there's another question. So earlier you mentioned about the enhancement of revenue, the part, and the third part is mail application campaign. And can you tell me what's that? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Why?
which one
Yeah.
is that?
That's going back.
the
And what
slide
else
6.
we can do? Yeah.
Slide
can we
6.
do? Yeah.
Slide 6? Okay.
Yeah.
Third point,
Yeah,
meal
that's it.
application.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The meal application campaign?
Yeah, mail application campaign. Can you give a little more information? Yeah.
Sure. So, as I've mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things happening in terms of that. Number one, we actually are sending a regular list to our site principals in terms of the applications, or a list of students a list of families that we haven't received applications for. That way, our staff can actually reach out and provide guidance in terms of completing that application. And there's a lot of things too. We had a graphic that we are going to create posters for. Is there something?
Maybe I can. I think the question may simply be funding related to concentration funds. We get base money from the state.
Right.
Yes.
But for students that qualify in certain areas, low socioeconomic status, homeless, we get, the more of those students that we identify, the more funding we get for supplemental and then potentially concentration funds. The meal application campaign, the free and reduced lunch application, is how we determine that. So making sure that we have applications filled out by as many people who are eligible as possible can have an impact on our funding.
As I understand, our data is very close. We're just missing a little bit, right? If we can have a little bit higher, so we can qualify the 25%, the extra the money, right?
Yes. So the LCFF, the way we are funded, has a couple of components. One of them is called the concentration grant, and you have to be at least 55% unduplicated pupil percentage.
Yes.
And you are correct, we have not met the 55%, which is why, while we are getting some of this, we are getting supplemental funds, but we are not getting concentration funds.
Okay.
Because of that. So this effort is actually to identify those families so that we could increase that, and not only provide support and assistance to those families, but increase the threshold and hopefully exceed 55%.
Okay, I was mentioning this one, I understand, and yes, and we try to identify which help the data. But in the meantime, I think we should aware and we should study why and the people that qualified, they are not applying. Not necessarily means that they don't have the information. And as I heard the community, they feel embarrassed. The students feel embarrassed and they feel we are bullied if they applied. So, and when we are concerned about the meal application campaign, can we find some ways and make sure and be careful about this? Because at least I know that and for the Asian community and the many people, they not apply, they feel embarrassed. Yeah.
So perhaps address that concern in the campaign as well.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I was going to mention. Part of that this is really to support them and help them have access to the things that they don't have right now. But But in addition to that, it allows us as the district to be able to count those people not yet counted to help us meet the 55% that we need to meet. And again, you're right about encouraging and delivering in such a way so that some people have either, for some reason, pride or embarrassment, like he's mentioned, is there. So that's what the campaign is all about, to get people to understand there's nothing to be embarrassed about, and you're actually helping not only yourself, but also the community, the school district, so that we are able to count those numbers to meet that percentage.
Thank you, Council. Yeah.
Is there a team or on staff who's responsible for driving this metric?
It's centrally controlled, but then we have multiple efforts both at the school sites. Our FSAs, Family Service Assistants, also help with that. And that's something that I think we're going to take a harder look at and see how we can better coordinate that. I mean, the bottom line, the number one goal is we want to make sure that any family in need gets the services that they have.
Yeah.
And whether or not we hit 55% or greater or not, then that'll be what
That's
it is.
secondary,
But,
yes.
you know, it's something that there are quite a few conditions that go along with the qualification for these services, and also the sensitivity that everybody has
Right.
pointed out is something we're well aware of as
Yeah.
well, and we'll take into consideration.
But just remember, even though it's secondary goal, it goes back, the money goes
Right.
back to them when we get it, because we have met the 55%.
Yeah.
If people need the services, we want them to access them,
Yeah.
and then if it exceeds 55%, we get
Closer to the families that could qualify. So really
right.
employing and focusing that group on this particular metric, I think would be a really great use of our staff.
I agree.
Yeah, and I said, I would try to help the couple families and the Chinese. They are poor. And I would ask, we do have this service, and I even tell them we can online to doing this, and the kids is rejected, and the kids failed, and she was being bullied in the school, and when people know she's applied for the meals and free meals and lunch, and so we should be very careful and
Confidential, I think.
Confidential.
Yeah, I can address that.
Yeah.
Right now, there's no way of knowing when you're in line for a
Right.
lunch, whether or not you're in free and reduced status or not. So that isn't
No, I mean,
true anymore.
Plus
but-
with the new law.
Yeah,
I don't know the procedures, but this I heard
Yeah.
this one for the
Yeah.
school, for the new school. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's
That's
confidential.
It's not only is that embedded in our practice already, but it's actually illegal to in some ways,
Yeah.
in any way, distinguish them.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're, as the board knows, one of the things that we're going to hopefully revamp considerably is our central enrollment process, and this will be embedded in that process as well to make this information more easily accessible, and hopefully make our families more comfortable filling out the application.
Sure.
Thank you.
Since we are on this point, so my question was that since this campaign is going on for some time, do we have some solid numbers that where we stand in terms of how many percentage we have? Do we have some sense of that?
Not at this point. We're still collecting that information.
Okay, thank you. Oh, so one more point, like he said, one time, there's sometimes back, some family mentioned that it's not kids, they bully the other person, they think Chinese, Indian, you are Asian, you are rich. There is a preconceived notion that everybody is rich, and then why are you, having the free lunch or something? So that need to be kind of, reminded to the staff.
No, I would say that the bullies, maybe it's not really the bully, but there's a mind in the kids. They feel, technically I said if we have anything happened in the school, you should report it. Let the teacher know, let us to know, and we should have take care. But sometimes this is kind of feeling, and the people feel that, yeah.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
done
Any
with
other
the
questions,
content?
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Member
so
Chima.
be a while on the same slide, number 6. We already have discussed that. And then other 2 parcel tax will be discussed next. And grow our enrollment. I had some points for me. I think maybe we were discussing the next point. I just went out of my brain. So I will come back on
Okay.
that. So
Let's start with
next, yeah.
Member Quiroz. Any other questions? Okay, I have a few questions if that's okay. I know we're going to be making our decision on the election cycle and also to proceed with the survey for the partial tax. Have we done any sort of preliminary, conversations around what's going to be added what's going to be the ask of the parcel tax? What percentage would go maybe perhaps towards, say, salaries, and how much of it would be programs and projects?
That actually will be captured with the survey, which is one of the items. A lot of that information will actually be, sizing all of that and collecting that type of information.
But doesn't that also come from the district? Because I mean, I don't think our legal or the person that's actually doing the survey, they're not the one coming up with these. We actually gave them that direction.
It's a little of both. One of the things that they'll do is they'll try to figure out what our general needs are, and we'll provide them with some of that information. And then they'll test those different things through the survey process to see what areas the community is most likely to support. So, for example, do we want to have, how do they feel about student safety? How do they feel about attracting and retaining staff? How do they feel about, any of the areas that and that'll be part of the process when we contract with if the board authorizes us to proceed forward with the survey, that will be part of their process is getting that feedback and structuring the survey around that information. But that's to go down that road. If the board authorizes that, then we can go down that road. So really tonight with the upcoming action items, it's asking the board to select not that you have to, selecting these options either to pick an election cycle or to authorize the district to go forward with a survey doesn't commit the district to anything. What we'd like to be able to do, the recommendation from the Budget and Finance Committee group was to clearly identify which election cycle, if any, we would target. The reason for that is the March cycle is really fast. And if you look at the timeline, for example, we couldn't do a parcel survey within that March timeline. So the recommendation is if we do consider a ballot measure, let's make it for November. It also hopefully has us not competing with the city. And then secondly, if that's the case, what we'd like to do is have a survey conducted for a parcel feasibility so we can come back to you with, now we have the bond information and the parcel and look side by side and then make a decision on whether or not you want to go forward.
Right.
We have time to do that for a November election cycle.
I just want to clarify that you talk about the parcel tax for city. Are they going to on the March or they on the November? Are they finalized?
There is this March, I believe, at first,
The city manager showed me that they're going to go forward in March. And then, but if it doesn't pass, they're going to bring it back in November. So hopefully it passes for them in March. But if it doesn't, we could be competing with them in November.
So in this case, it would possible November have if we decide to have a parcel tax, we have a two parcel tax.
It's possible.
Well,
So, Sharon, to your question, if you go to slide 10, it says the use of the proceeds, and the parcel tax can be used for any purpose specified in the ballot. As long as we mention in the ballot that we are using it for the salaries, we can use it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm trying to figure out, have we gauged any discussions around that conversation, right? Because that information is going to come from the district as to how much of it's going to be, in the language at least, stated that how much of it is going to be used for the project, how much is it going to be used towards salaries. And that could be the make it or break it deal in terms of whether it gets passed or not.
Yeah. So just last note on that, the feedback and the input from the district or staff, of course, as well as the qualitative data that would be collected from the survey if we move forward with that, would feed into that ballot language that actually declares what those priorities are or what the money will end up being used for.
Okay. And my last comment on that is I know that we're going to see a comparison between the bond, well, we already have the bond survey results and with the parcel tax results side by side. I would love there to be a community forum somewhere, whether it's a workshop or a public setting where community can come in and actually provide their additional feedback and buy into this. I mean, we all know what happened with Measure EE with the city, right? There's the communication and the education piece that we have to be aware of if we're going to have either one of those on the ballot measure.
With the November election cycle, we would have time to do that.
Can I add something? You already started sharing what we recommended from the Finance Committee, and one was we need to choose as a board regarding when to do it, November or March, and to make that decision, we need to look at the factors that would yield the best for us. if we do it in March, why would that be the month, or in November? We need to look at the timeline to make sure that we are doing a good job in doing our research and survey before we jump into one or the other. And as the timeline looks like right now, we're really far behind for the March date. We could do it, but it's going to be hectic for the people who have to do the work and may not do a good job because of the timeline. The other thing that I'm looking at is our track record of not passing any partial tax because of the 2/3 requirement. It's really difficult to get 2/3 votes versus 55%. I'm almost thinking it's best to have something not done, not to have anything at all. But at the end of the day, we want whatever yields the most funds for us. And also, I think we need to remember that bond money also could be designated so that if we have those for the facilities, we free up general funds to address our other needs, which may include salaries as well. So it's just something to look at. But again, at the end of the day, when we have that comparison next to each other, we will be looking at which one is likely to pass and will yield the most funds for the district. And as we looked at the bond for the site units already, that would be an ongoing revenue that is coming to our district in perpetuity, I think, unless I'm wrong with that. Is that true? We will be getting that. So something to consider and think about before we make this decision.
Sharon?
Yes.
So I reserved these two last bullets points because we have agenda items based on the parcel tax or capital improvement. So since Linda has already started those conversations, so I would like to share my thoughts about it because we discussed, me and Linda and some community members, we discussed those things in the Budget Advisory Committee. Jeff and Linda, they mentioned we have failed to parcel taxes, but at the same time we need to look at the timings those parcel tax. It was the downturn 2011 and 12, and it's the same parcel tax. And also I wish I could have asked you on that day to bring the language of those parcel taxes, and also we might have from the county Alameda County election site, that how much was the percentage they failed to achieve, that how much was the difference. So those numbers, they are present, and we have to perform the analysis for that and look at the circumstances. And also if we go for the bond, if the board chooses to go for the bond, it's a long term. We just have passed the bond 5-6 years back, and we still have $30 million plus dollars in that bond still left. And it will be too early for the bond. And at the same time, it will be difficult to use that money for the salaries because we just had the strike, and then negotiation season is still around the corner. And if we go for the bond, it might take years to bring the yield.
So I think once we have the data, we'll certainly have another discussion as to what the survey result yielded for parcel tax. But you bring up a good point on what we have in terms of the measure.
Right, but because there are items in the action items in the next agenda, so we have to have that information and discussion to decide which way we need to go. Today.
No, I think
we are just going for the. I know we are just going for the survey only at this time.
No. All we're asking is we don't have. All we're asking for is today in the later items is, will you authorize us to go get the information you're asking for? That's
survey.
it. And once we get the parcel information, we'll be able to put it next to the bond information and then have the discussion that you're talking about. We're not even prepared for that at all now.
Okay. I just have a comment and have a questions and regarding this one. And I understand and Governor Newsom just signed the agreed to put the AB 48 to put the
state facilities,
school bond and the construction bond and for the March 2 discussion. So I want to understand what this will affect to us, because we will decide either going to bond or parcel tax, because bond have a lot of limitations, and since we have a 15 billion the
Biggest
school,
bond in the
yes,
history of the
facility
yes,
bond, and is this
Right.
will affect us? And I guess there'll be a question, and maybe
We're not prepared for that tonight. We'll have to, we'll come
Right.
back.
You have to keep
Again,
it in mind.
this is
Yes.
all part of a bigger discussion at a later date. So
Right.
we'll come back when we have that
Certainly.
information.
Any other questions related to this presentation and what we have? None? Okay, thank you, Ms. Halpin. All right, moving on to the public hearing. All right, so I will now open the public hearing for the K-12 sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials. Are there any speakers? Do we have any speakers on that?
No speakers on the public hearing.
Okay, then may I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 015-1920, 2019-20, K-12 sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials and materials.
Second.
It was a motion made by Member Chima, Member Canlis, and seconded by Member Wong. Discussion?
None.
Roll call, please.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to the information items, we have two items, quarterly reports regarding complaints filed under the Williams complaint procedure for quarter 4, and then also for quarter 4, 2018-2019. And similarly in 8.2, it's 2019-2020, quarter 1. There are no reports, no complaints received. Are there any question or concerns or comments you guys would like to make on those two?
No.
No, okay. Moving on to the 8.3 items from the board. We'll start with our student board members.
Okay. I know that Logan is grateful for our surprise 2 days off because of PG&E. But other than that, we've been working on homecoming, and we have like our spirit week this week, and we had like class spirit things, and it's been going all week. And then the game is this Friday, and the dance is on Saturday. And then I know that the blood drive preparations, because we have those like twice a year, and it's starting next week, the preparations during the club fairs. And then I just wanted to comment about how there's been like recent like vandalism threats around Logan like recently. I know there's been like 2. But I don't know. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay, so for Conley, so far I've just set up a meeting so I could personally meet with each of the students in each class, and I'm putting together a survey for the students to fill out and make sure they know that they can contact me if they have any concerns or any ideas involving with their school. And then for my school, for Dakota Independent Studies, so far, we just started our community garden club. So this Saturday, October 19th, at 8 in the morning to 12, people can come get some students can get community service hours, and we're actually accepting any donations or tools from the community. And so far, yeah. And I've sent out another survey for my school also, so the students know that they can contact me and if they have any questions or concerns.
Good. I hope they do fill out that survey so you can bring their concerns and suggestions to us. Thank you. Everyone, Shira.
I'm actually going to defer to 9.2 when I talk about the report from the Communication Advocacy Committee, so I'll pass.
Okay, Member Wong?
I have no report.
Thank you. Member Shima?
I would like to know that if we can capture the instructional minutes for the 2 days we closed the James Logan High School and the funding as well, if you have the simple answer, or we need to wait later.
I love these kind of questions. Very simple answer. Yes, we'll apply for a waiver for the 2 days from the state, so hopefully we get full ADA for that.
Okay. So for me, I was able to, Budget Advisory Committee this time. First time I was not able to attend, so it was good information. Thank you, Annette, for putting up with our weird questions sometimes. And then I was able to attend actually Union City's Family Center grand opening on that day with some of our staff, Derek McNamara, and it was wonderful sight, and a lot of families they participated, and I'm glad that we are providing this service, but I don't know at what cost. And some of the parents or staff members they kind of mentioned that, oh, make sure that our funding does not get cut, just for your information. And at the Mission Valley ROP, we hosted a legislature's luncheon for the CTEC grant. So we shared what we do at MVROP, what kind of programs we had. So we gave them a tour of the MVROP. Let's see what comes out of that. And then also I attended the Senator Bob Kioski's State of the Senate address. I don't have all the bills he is proposing, but he is, it seems like he's a friend of our public education, and we can depend upon him. The last thing I would like to, I'm so glad that finally Punjabi Parents Advisory Committee is off the ground. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and thank you, Superintendent Thompson, for the support you have provided, and hopefully some more good things will come out of that to support our schools and our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Canlis.
Thank you. Thank you again for including the Filipino American History Month resolution in today's meeting. And I would like to repeat what Ms. Noriega has already shared regarding the October 22nd event at the library, and then the city is also doing a resolution for the same thing. And also I would like to thank the staff. I know you don't hear it enough. Staff meaning parent educators, teachers, principals, district office, for all the work that you do, because without you, I know you don't hear this enough, we cannot do a good job. So thank you for collaborating and working for our students and make sure that they get the best that we could give them. And as far as the Finance Committee report, we've said some of it, and we'll continue at the portion where we're talking about finance.
Okay, I'm actually going to pass my time.
Sharon?
Okay.
Sorry. I just forgot, I didn't notice Nancy is here. Thank you so much, Nancy, for your wonderful work at the Family Resource Center. Thank you.
Okay, well, Linda, actually yours is a good segue. It's actually the week of the school administrator this week. So it's, and I think you can see the commitment and dedication from our administrators here. But one of the things, as I go around and visit the sites, I'm in a school almost every day, if not every day, and I'm very pleased and continually impressed by the work of our site administrators and our staff. I feel so lucky to be coming into a district where we have such quality, hardworking administrators. So I'd like to thank all of you out there for all of your hard work, especially tonight. You could see it with Scott's presentation, his team, great work. And Annette, I know that it wasn't just you, it was you and your staff, so thank you for your report too. So there's that. I always give an update on goal progress. As you know, we're hoping to bring new board goals in December. The data, as I shared last time, the data collection phase is over, and I'm processing literally several thousand pieces of data and coding them and putting them together, and we'll be putting together a draft report. We're hoping to have the second board meeting in November as a work session, as we talked about, instead of a regular board meeting, where you'll get the preliminary findings. And in between now and then, I'll be doing more vetting with all of our stakeholder groups about what the data is showing. And let's see what else has been happening. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. Power outages and a variety of other issues, graffiti issues and whatnot. And the good thing about, although I'm terribly frustrated with how PG&E handled that whole mess, because the reality is we had to close schools that didn't close Logan that didn't need to be closed. We did learn a lot. And coming up at a board meeting soon, we'll be presenting some safety recommendations and some things we can do related to both what we learned from that situation, what we're learning from the city in terms of the hack that they dealt with and they're still dealing with. It's amazing. 6 weeks later, they're still suffering from that. And then also on some of our facilities and structural issues like fencing and cameras. So that'll be coming soon. And hopefully move forward quickly on some of those issues. See if that's, did I get everything? That's it.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, the board committees, report from the Budget and Finance, Member Chima or Member Canlis or Member Wong, if you attended.
So, should I go first? So we discussed I have this agenda here, about the structure of the committee and who will be reporting it. And so we decided that me and Linda, we will be taking the turns. So last time she kind of reported. So this time it is my turn to report. But most of the things we discussed here on the agenda, they became part of our board agenda. So I think we have discussed some of the things. The main thing is how to enhance our revenue for our district. And two proposals, one for bond or parcel. So we are bringing those recommendations to the full board, so to decide today that which way, to have larger discussions.
Thank you. Anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I just want to add and summarize that into 2 points. One, today we just need to look at the recommendation to make a decision whether March or November, and recommending November. And then the second one is to authorize a survey for parcel tax so that we could do that comparison. Those are the two recommendations from the committee.
Yeah, and they are part of the agenda, today's board agenda, right?
Thank you. Anything else you would like to add, Member Wong? I don't know if you had.
No, he did not
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. For the communication and advocacy, Member Nishihara.
Yeah, so last meeting we reviewed, there hasn't been a meeting since our last board meeting, but just recapping last meeting, we reviewed our guiding principles, as well as a few other kind of structural and governance things. Tomorrow, the superintendent and we'll be dialing President Kaur in. We'll be meeting with a team over at San Leandro to take a look at the journey that they've taken to develop their communication strategy, and we'll see what kind of learnings we can gather from them. And so expect a readout either at the next board meeting, or we'll be discussing it at our committee meeting on Thursday. We will continue our areas of inquiry on existing communication technology. The plan is we're going to make a best effort to get Lauren Sagayan from the city. She is coming. Lauren Sagayan from the City of Union City, who leads communication and social media with the City of Union City. We also have a technology audit of all of our communication channels that's ready, and if there's time that we can review that on Thursday. And also, if time avails, we'd like to do a retrospective with regard to how communications were handled in events like the power outage. It's fresh in our minds, and I think that there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of learn from that as a great learning experience.
Just to add a last minute ad, we're actually having an Ed Leo person come as well to talk about.
Oh, okay. So
it's going to be pretty packed. Yeah.
Okay.
So
we'll get either that or some subset of all of those things accomplished on Thursday. But it'll be a packed agenda. I'm sure it'll be very productive.
Can I ask one question? I know this morning when the county shut off of this, or not shut off, but the server was not working. So something to think about what do we do when that happens?
Yeah, it's probably a larger conversation we'll have with technology about the efficacy of using a hub and spoke model that we have right now, as opposed to having failover redundancy at the different sites. But that would probably be a conversation that the Director of Technology would likely have at a future meeting. But yeah, definitely a soft spot in our infrastructure that we should give a hard look at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been pretty productive, and I think tomorrow's meeting is going to be a good learning for us as well. So we'll share that with the rest of the board. Moving on to the next item, the public comments. Are there any visitors on topics not on the agenda?
Yes, we have several. I'll just take them in order of that they're in front of me. So the first is Angelica Canlas on class size.
Good evening. I think it is fortuitous that all of these presentations happened, and it allows you to ponder all of the data that you saw in contrast to what is happening with class size and how class size might impact some of those things that you saw. So I'm here to talk about class size, to keep it at the forefront of everybody's mind, including our community members, elected board members, and the superintendent and district managers. The board's decision to approve class sizes of 30 students to one teacher in grades 1 through 3 is not what is best for students. I don't believe that it speaks to the district goals that were presented tonight on college and career readiness, equity and access, personalized learning. I can only speak from my experience as a science specialist, where my highest class numbers are at 35. Due to the way our site mainstreams special ed students during prep, a class of 30 is split into 3 groups and added to other classes during prep, bringing those class sizes up to 35. It is important to me that you understand the scope of the job of an elementary specialist. We teach students ranging from 4 years old to 10 years old every single day. Think about how different a TK classroom looks from a 5th grade classroom, the furniture, the walls, the way the space is utilized. I need space in my room for 28 kindergartners to sit on the floor, as well as desks for 32 5th graders, and the space between tables to make sure that chairs don't bump into each other, and that also allows me room to move around the room while I'm teaching, and it's a tight squeeze. So now imagine 35 students, specifically 35 7-year-olds, where there are only 32 desks in the room. 3 of them have to sit at a table pushed into the corner where they cannot adequately see the whiteboard and projection screen. Each day we look around to see if any students are absent so we can temporarily put them at a real desk. I've had paraprofessionals ask if students were in trouble because they were sitting at that overflow side table. There are often not enough sets of materials for activities and not enough equipment to accommodate that extra table, so we have to make groups of 5, which are harder to manage, and limit the amount of time that each student gets to access the materials. And we are already crunched for time. Students only get 40 minutes of science 1 day a week. At a board meeting last year, the district recognized and honored our elementary science specialists for our work in coding and robotics across the district. This year, the New Haven Schools Foundation awarded us a grant to continue that work, but that level of instruction cannot happen with 35 students. And I don't just mean that it's difficult, which it is, but I only have 16 robots. If students work in pairs, that leaves 3 students without access to a robot. It's not equitable, and our program is not built for 35 students. Also, I fear for the future of our students if we do not value the work of all elementary specialists. The amazing talent that we see in the Logan Band and in Logan's athletic programs exists because students were exposed to high-quality programs at the elementary level. They've had the expertise of music and PE specialists to develop their skills from a young age. If we want our students to be college and career ready, the work of science specialists and teacher librarians is critical in developing students' 21st century skills. Currently at Kitayama, my son's school doesn't have a science specialist. He is missing out on critical instruction and experiences that he will need to draw on as he moves into middle school next year, where he will have science every day. Thank you.
Okay, next we have the topics is district maps and Michael Gardner.
Hey everybody, I'm going to be talking about the district maps, and I'm putting as much on me for not recognizing the important thing that we didn't talk about beforehand about which district would be voting when. The whole purpose of making the district maps was to make sure that unrepresented neighborhoods would have a district seat in the board. And because of the way the maps were made, there is District 2, which is long unrepresented, but they don't have an actual election until 2022. And there's a fair chance, flip coin, that we have new maps after the census is done, which could end up with the same thing happening again. I think that we should have thought of that ahead of time, including me, and we didn't, but that is a problem because the whole purpose of making the district maps was making sure that all of Union City is represented. And if I lived in that neighborhood and I had, if I were the person bringing the lawsuit, I would not feel satisfied with the result, knowing that for sure I would not have my own representative for 2 years and a chance that after that time I might have the district change again. And so I think that when it goes to the county to be reviewed, that there's a good chance that people will be standing against it. And I think that if it comes back, we ought to fix that so that District 2 gets a spot in 2020. All right, thank you.
Okay, next same topic, the by trustee election adopted plan, and Gavin Smith.
Good evening, President Carr, trustees, and Superintendent Thompson. So
I agree with everything that Michael said. I was looking at the the F3 law firm, their presentation, and it talks about the California Voting Rights Act and that it prohibits at-large elections because it impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice or ability to influence the outcome of an election. The attempt to address that, the only safe harbor to address claims against this Voting Rights Act is the by trustee area elections. And we did that. We went through the process. However, in the presentation, it talked about how the maps cannot favor or discriminate against incumbents. It appears, based on how the map that was adopted, that it does in fact favor the incumbents. Additionally, the protected class that Michael was talking about, Hispanic and Latinos, out of the 5 areas, Area 2 is the only one where they hold a 50.69% majority. They will only be able to vote for their representative in 2022, which disenfranchises them until that time. And as Michael said, the census very well may cause these areas to change, and so they may be disenfranchised again. In the other areas, 1, 3, 4, and 5, the Hispanic population is very unrepresented compared to other populations. I believe that that violates not only the spirit of the change that this district sought to do, it actually violates the law. So I do hope that the county will reject the decision of adopting MAP 2, and I hope that when that happens, I hope that you guys will take a look at the other maps and choose one that does not disenfranchise Hispanic and Latino voters. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is on library programs, librarians, and specialists, and Sean English.
Good evening. I am here tonight in defense of our school library programs, librarians, and support specialists. Libraries are an important cornerstone of a healthy school community that gives our students the opportunity to experience new ideas, get lost in wonderful stories, while at the same time providing a sense of place for gathering. In the words of my dear friend, Roxanne Ansola Beher, educator, librarian, and district-level administrator in charge of library services for 38 years in my hometown of San Leandro, where she fought for the integrity of school libraries there back in 2007, school libraries are the school's classroom. And just like every other classroom in a school, the library requires a certificated teacher librarian at the helm. Someone qualified to steer the library in support of the school's curriculum, which is the primary purpose of a site's library. They are our students' lifelines to the world and all of the information in it. Replacing trained experts in research and information with aides or techs completely robs a library of any kind of ability to teach students research skills in the library itself. Students will essentially lose the only instructor who teaches them solely research skills. Removing credentialed librarians starts a downward slide in quality. Middle and high school libraries are two-person affairs, the librarian and aide forming a team. The aide holds down the myriad clerical duties while the librarian focuses on teaching research skills, building the library books collection, collaborating with classroom teachers to leverage their lessons, providing advising kids on what to read next, intelligently weeding the collection, budgeting. A school library without its credentialed librarian soon becomes just a room lined with books. New Haven should not repeat the errors of the San Leandro Unified School District from 2007. Rather, New Haven should look at how San Leandro Unified regards its school libraries now. All middle and high school libraries led by credentialed libraries, with 8 previously closed elementary school libraries renovated, redesigned to serve the district kids. San Leandro Unified parents expect and now enjoy an open, thriving, high-quality library in every school. New Haven kids deserve no less, and much less is exactly what they'll get without a qualified librarian in charge. Do you honestly believe that students in New Haven don't deserve the same level of education as students at Head Royce or Piedmont High or even my hometown of San Leandro? Why should our students get a second-class education as far as research and media literacy? I realize the struggle to keep up with the many changes in technology, rising costs in books and other materials, staff and budget shortages, and a growing demand from our students for more information. As community leaders, I ask you to please make a commitment to our school libraries, staffed by experts, and to continued library services for all students. It would be educational malpractice to deprive our students of the resources that our libraries, staffed by credentialed experts and support personnel, provide. Thank you.
No other speakers on.
Are there any on the agenda?
Oh, yes, we have two. First is the topic of parcel tax. Roland.
Good evening, is this on? Okay. First of all, congratulations on your lottery money, Mr. Pisani. Good evening, members of the board. I rise today in advocacy towards a parcel tax measure over a bond and the choosing of the November date for the ballot. I advocate for the parcel tax because, one, it can be spent on salaries and anything we want if we word it correctly. And the fact that the reason why we are considering the bond and the parcel tax in the first place was because we had a strike over salaries. So I think we should choose something that allows us to spend on salaries. Second, this money is recurring dollars, and according to the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the people who passed Proposition 13 in 1976, once a proposition passes creating a parcel tax, it passes the subsequent times more frequently, meaning the moment you pass a parcel tax, the chances of it passing the next time are way higher than before. That is why Union City's public safety parcel tax has only failed once in the last 19 years, and that is because they removed the sunset date and they doubled the price of the parcel tax. And three, it can raise more money than employee housing and is not as susceptible to lawsuit as the employee housing bond is. I'm sure many of you know that there are people who would refuse to put down multifamily, high-density housing in this city and all cities across the state of California. It is the reason why we have a housing crisis in the first place. Because of strict regulations as well as laws allowing these NIMBYists to sue, our employee housing bond has a significantly high risk of getting a lawsuit from these NIMBYists or any type of protest from these NIMBYists towards the city council, which can and will reject it if the protests are big enough. And finally, I advocate for the November ballot because, one, it allows seniors from the class of 2020 to vote, and two, it allows higher turnout from voter bases who want to throw out a certain orange man occupying our White House, and the number of seniors that would turn 18 at the time would overshadow the number of registered Republicans in Union City. I also would ask that if we pass the polling resolution, that the pollsters evaluate the possibility of a $1,000 per parcel tax, that like Orinda's, which has no sunset. And with all that, thank you.
Okay, we have one more speaker on items 12.5 through 12.8, new contracts, and that's Gavin Smith.
All right, good evening again, President Carr, Board Trustees, and Superintendent Thompson. So I just want to go back through a couple of things. So earlier this evening, the student achievement update that Mr. Pisani presented really highlighted the great work that we do. I appreciate the the recognition of Administrators Week, right?
Yes.
But I want to also talk about, use the metaphor of a tree. Our district's like a tree, and I felt like what Mr. Pisani was presenting looked like we were looking at the leaves, and those are the flowers, whatever you want to call them. And that's the product. But deep down underneath the ground is where the nutrients and everything that feeds that plant, that tree, that flower comes from. And those are the teachers. Those are the classrooms, the class environment. If the classroom isn't well taken care of, the students will not be well taken care of, and we will not see the same type of good performance that we have right now. So class size, as was mentioned before, has hits on aspects of equity, access, and personalization. Also, as a special education teacher, I can tell you that a lot of students who struggle in learning, sometimes those behaviors come out as behaviors, or sometimes that frustration comes out as behaviors. And so that could also contribute to some of our discipline issues with regards to special education students. To the topic at hand, Ms. Heldman talked about how do we make money available. And I do want to just, again, I think I said at the last meeting, thank you, Mr. Thompson, for meeting with Mr. Angeles and Mr. Lash and myself. We had a good conversation about the Me Too clause. I really think the efforts that we put into the conversation and the changes that I see in the language of the contract, taking the classified / management and making it only management, I think that's a good start. I know that there are some fundamental differences that are still there about how the Me Too clause, about whether or not that's the right thing to do. I do have concerns when we are under budget constraints that we have a presentation that talks about how we're spending more than we're taking in, and the board in June passed the Me Too for admin, and that was totally optional. So I do think that if one of the things that was not on Ms. Heldman's presentation was just this concept of talking from the top. There was quite a cadre of people who came up, of administrators that came up to speak about our student achievement and the goals met. And I have very little confidence that they spearheaded much of what was happening. I put that credit into the site administrators, as Mr. Thompson was praising earlier, and our teachers, and most notably our students and our classrooms. So anyway, again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to the action items. May I have a motion and a second to approve the contract with Garcia Hernandez Sani LLP?
So moved.
Second.
I'm a second.
Okay, so I'll open it up for discussion. Any comments, discussion? Go ahead.
Just a comment to disclose that one of the partners in this forum is a longtime friend. So, Sunny, that's all.
Okay.
I don't have any influence. I never suggested this.
Yeah. And I'm also going to be disclosing a similar concern. Not a concern, but the fact that I do also know an associate from that firm. Again, nothing to do with selection of this. It's actually something that you have used in your past district. So I don't know if you want to have anything more to say on to that before we open it up for voting.
No, other than that, the decision to bring this form forward, I didn't know this until after I already made the recommendation. So they're a great firm, and I think we should move forward with it.
And also, it's a pay-as-you-go. Obviously, we're not obligated to use them at all times. And also, the recommendation was that it's always nice to have two different firms representing us in different fashion. So that's the idea behind it. So with that, if there are no further discussion, may I have a roll, actually just roll call since we already made the motion.
Aye.
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 Abstain. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is the increase in the substitute daily rate of pay. Mr. McNamara.
Good evening, Superintendent Thompson, President Kaur and members of the board. A few weeks ago, I came to you and talked about the possibility of, in the future, bringing the substitute rate up to another level. It turns out that it ended up being a lot faster in terms of our recommendation than I anticipated. The weeks after, even the next day after that last board meeting, I think we had 5 classes uncovered that next day. In the subsequent 2 weeks after that, there were so many instances of classes not being covered where administrators or people by triage had to cover classes. It is unprecedented, and I think that a lot of it is the pay. And so we actually did an audit calling the different substitutes who have worked in our district for many years to actually ask them. And for many of them, they do go to Hayward. In fact, Hayward, the person who does substitute in Hayward actually said they have an overabundance of substitutes and don't actually use all their substitutes on a daily basis. So they have an overage. And so they are the number 2 in the county. We wanted to get up to number 3, which is what we traditionally were. This recommendation tonight to go up to 170 puts us at number 3, which would be tied with San Leandro and San Lorenzo. Most of our subs kind of work in between. They've worked with us for a long time. They actually told us they go to San Lorenzo or San Leandro because it's $20 more, but if they had their choice, they would come here. So that is one of the bases for that number tonight. So I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Actually, may I get a motion and a second to first approve this, and then we'll engage in a discussion. So can I get a motion and a second to approve the increase?
I have a question.
I know, we're going to get into a discussion, and then you can ask him for that.
Okay.
All right.
So motion and a second to approve the increase of substitute daily rate of pay effective November 1st, 2019.
So moved.
I'm second.
Okay, now you can ask your question.
Yeah, I think we also increased the long-term,
Yes.
yeah,
From 160 to 180.
right.
So
I just
that
want to make sure
subsequently went up 20. Yes.
people at home heard that as well.
And I do want to put one thing in there is that one of the things that we worked with payroll on is to find out the exact date that we have to make it effective, and it wouldn't be tomorrow, it would be November 4th, would be my recommendation.
Okay, 4th, not 1st.
Right, not 1st, November 4th for payroll purposes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, I just have a comment, and I mean, if we're looking for the neighbors and where is very low, and especially at the employee the ratio is very low, and it's very difficult to find the substitute teachers. In order to serve to the students and be good to the students, we should be more attractive.
Yes.
I'm suggesting we can maybe raising little higher. Yeah, for example, you mentioned this one, daily rates is 170. How about 180?
Or 85.
Yeah, this can attract 185, and yeah, in this case, we can attract the good teachers and substitute come to the district to serve to our students.
So I don't know how we will go about the motion because recommendation is for 170. So I'm also of favor to go for move to the second spot 185 because when the teachers they do substitute work and then they most likely they end up becoming a teacher in that district. So I don't want to go number 3. I think number 2 will be good for me personally. If the other board members they agree, they can share their comfort level where they feel like. But I feel like we should move forward with the 185. I mean, it's certainly want to compete with the Fremont, but then that will be it's a big gap. So for now, I'm proposing that we move it to the 185.
Actually, we have a motion on the table for 170. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So can we modify the motion or how?
So hang on, I think as a part of this,
discussion, yeah.
As a part of this discussion, I think it would probably be a good idea for us to determine, because I know that the spread, the range going from 150 to 170 is about
208,000.
8,000.
Yeah.
I think before we decide to go to 180 or 185,
It's about another 150.
it'll be what?
It's about another 150.
Another 150, so that's about
358.
Ongoing cost.
ongoing costs.
Right. So that, I was thinking along the same line, we really need to look at the impact of any decision we make, because I think this is a discussion that should have happened earlier on, because.
I mean, the way I'm thinking about it right now is like, you know, how long did it take us to get to this point?
5 years.
If we actually decide that if we do 170, or sorry, if we go up to 170 and we start noticing that there's actually not a lot of incremental,
Changes.
activity,
Yes.
we can simply take it back to another board action like this and say, you know what, we brought it to 170. it didn't really have the
I
effect
agree.
that we wanted, let's consider raising it. I mean, before we start committing ongoing dollars to something, we don't actually really know where the threshold
Exactly.
is.
For my concern, yes, like San Leandro, they already is 170, and Hayward is 185 for daily. If we go into 170, how we can attract the substitute teacher come back to a school district? Fremont is $231.60 a daily. Yeah, and Hayward is 185. Only the one is lower than us is, the Newark is already 165.
Can I say one thing about that? Historically, for the last 15 years, Fremont and Hayward have always been more than New Haven. We've always been 3 or 4, or roughly. Again, we've fallen back the last 2 years. I think the other districts, sometimes it's a game of chicken where other districts will jump up $5 just to kind of try to stay competitive. We have waited for lots of reasons over the last couple of years, financially mainly, to hold off. We've gotten to a point where we feel like this is the first step. Doing the swing was one piece of it, just a small piece. This is the second step to really try to bolster up our the sub pool that we have. This is a good first step. As member Nishihira said, that really the next step after that is for us to analyze it, make a recommendation to say, yes, it's working, or we need to bump it up again. It's always your prerogative at a subsequent board meeting to raise it if
I
you
think
need to.
the other thing also is it's it's unidirectional, which means you can probably go one way, but it's a lot harder to pull it back.
Absolutely.
If you wanted to, right?
Absolutely.
You can't go from 180 to back to 170. I mean, so
And it's not that I don't want to go to 185, but it's dollars, and I'm trying to be fiscally responsible, trying to figure out what's the incremental best approach to this.
Right.
I think given our budget challenges, it might be, I think it's best that we try at 170, and then like we just kind of mentioned, if it doesn't seem to be working, it doesn't produce the result, then we can bring it back for action item and direct the district to go higher.
Agreed.
If I can just add a comment, what we can do is have Derek do an analysis, it's actually perfect time to test it out with the holiday
Swing.
season's coming.
Yep.
And we can report back in the new year, or maybe at the end of January, about what difference it's made. And then you can always raise it more.
Absolutely.
And my question is what's the status now? How much the substitute teacher we shorted now for this semester?
I'd have to look. I don't have those exact numbers, but it has been much harder this year to fill substitute. I think the directors who work here who put a lot of the PD on, and then just teachers in general who need to take a day here and there, it's very difficult. We've had principals cover classes more than ever, and then PDs where people get pulled back. Nothing makes people more upset than doing lesson plans and having to get pulled back. So we don't want that to happen, but it's happening with more regularity this year.
But as Mr. Nishihara and Ms. Kuro mentioned, I think we all, first of all, want to have the highest, if we could afford it.
No, we appreciate that.
But we also need to be fiscally responsible. And at this point, I think what Mr. Nishihara suggested let's take a look at it, see if this is going to either attract more people or it's still a problem. And if it's still a problem, we could reevaluate and perhaps look at the next step at that point.
My question is anybody do some kind of research and follow-up? So the substitute teachers, and they go into the different district, which district they went to?
Many of the districts do go to Hayward, but they have gone to San Leandro. People who have been here for many, many years have gone to Hayward, San Leandro. Fremont's a little bit weird because they pay a lot more, but they are in the union, so it's a little bit different. But we do lose it to the higher pay is the number one thing people cited.
So for me, I know we have budget concerns, and I don't see them in the near future, those budget concerns going away. But I would like to attract more kind of professionals from the industry if we are giving them a little bit better to come try our teaching profession, because we always hear that we have teacher shortage. So I think this will help them, attract a little bit better into the teaching profession. So if you see this, I know it's a cost, but if you see comparing to the whole big budget picture, I still see it as it's not that much of a amount. It's just me. That's the way I see it. So I think that I still believe that we need to move forward with 185. But it depends upon the board members. Yeah.
I'll bring this back.
I was going to say if we can get the results on both the swing contract and then also what this is going to result in, so that way we can take a look at it and bring it back.
Absolutely. No, this is good for everybody. So we do want to bring it back, but I'll let you know as soon as probably in the next 2 months, because we need some time to actually look at the data.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions, concerns, comments? All right, roll call, please.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Shima.
Aye.
Canlis.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, may I have a motion and a second to select the November 2020 election for a potential ballot initiative?
So moved.
I'm a second.
Discussion on this topic.
None?
I want to know, I want to discuss it because we had some discussion in the Budget Advisory Committee, having the pros and cons in the March and in the November 2020 elections. So I know we already have mentioned that city is going to ask for the parcel tax in the March election. And I personally feel like we need to compete in the March, but I know it's too close and it will be too hard for our staff, and we might not be able to do the survey and everything. The reason I'm thinking to go for the March election is if the city's parcel tax did not pass and they're going to come in November, then it will be very difficult for us. So if we are competing in November, we better compete in March. That's my thinking. And another reason is in the March, this area, our Union City area, is majority Democrats. And in the March election, because there is no nomination for the president election from the Republican Party, so there will be little participation from the Republican Party. I mean, this is the, everything is just, what do you say, discussions in the larger picture, how they make the strategies that which ballot will go and when, from the political perspective that, and Democrat Party voters, they tend to support our schools and taxes in general. So if we can make it to the March election, I think it's my personal viewpoint that we should hit for the March parcel tax election. Sooner is the better.
Well, I think we made the motion for November 2020 at the moment. That's what the
I know, but I
recommendation
still
was.
can give my thoughts if people want to reconsider that. Yeah.
If I can just make a quick comment, the problem with the March timeline is we would not be able to get any kind of survey results prior to that. You'd be going into it blind. You would not know what the city, what the community would support for a parcel tax. So the only way to get that information is to go to the November timeline.
So since I don't know the whole process, that if, for example, if we decide to go for the March 2020 election, then how much investment in terms of time and money we need to make to initiate the process that we are moving forward in the March, and at the same time starting the survey. So how early or how much is the investment we have to make if we want to go to the March 2020 election?
And I do have the timeline. I believe you'd have to pass a resolution at the next board meeting to move forward, which would start the money and all of the other procedures.
Not only that, we actually have to raise funds towards the campaign.
Yeah.
You can't use your general funds dollars for it. Remember when we had to campaign for Measure M? We actually raised funds and seek donations to use for paying the campaign consultant.
I see.
All of that.
Mhm.
And we don't have funds for that.
You would really not have any resources to support a parcel tax for that March. It's really, you would have to pass the resolution with no funding and no survey results indicating whether or not the community would even support it.
So another point I want to discuss is previously it was mentioned that, oh, we tried one time or two elections for the parcel tax, we didn't pass it for the schools. But look at our city. We have passed so many parcel tax for the city side. Why not for our kids? So I think the timing was not right at the time, and we should go move forward with the parcel tax. If not March, then definitely in November.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments, concerns, questions? All right, roll call, please.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Ishihara.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Shima.
Aye.
Canlis.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, may I have a motion and a second to authorize to explore the feasibility of and determine community support for a local parcel tax measure?
So moved.
I'm a second.
Discussion?
None.
Okay, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye, thank you. Moving on to the next action item. May I have a motion and a second to approve the amendment to employment agreement between the governing board of the New Haven Unified School District and Chief Business Officer Annette Heldman?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. The next action item is another contract. May I have a motion and a second to approve the amendment to employment agreement between the governing board of the New Haven Unified School District and Chief Academic Officer Scott Pizzani?
Is it Derek McNamara?
Yeah.
Oh, I just won, okay, so, yeah. We can do one for the Chief Personnel Officer, Derek McNamara first.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Just a comment about I don't want to say the comments again and again, but all of the 4 contracts, thank you, Superintendent Thomas Johnson, sorry about that.
We have a new one.
They're both famous
think all
last
works.
name. Thomas is first name. So, it took me some time to practice it. I just still made the mistake. So,
We know
for
what you mean.
working with our with our associations and getting it resolved, being patient, and I'm glad that at least that got put to rest for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. May I now have a motion and a second to approve the amendment to employment agreement between the governing board of New Haven Unified School District and Chief Academic Officer Scott Pizzani?
So moved. I thought
Second.
we just did that. We didn't.
No,
No.
yeah, I had it switched on my paper.
I move.
Second.
Discussion?
None.
Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye, thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve the amendment to employment agreement between the governing board of the New Haven Unified School District and Superintendent John Thompson?
So moved.
I'm second.
Discussion?
None.
Just want to say that all of these contracts, the expiry date is 2022, so I hope all 4 of you don't leave us together. Because one time I mentioned we need to stagger those because we don't want to let you go together.
All at one time.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda items. Now, are there any items on the agenda for a separate discussion, comment, or for later, tabling it for later time?
None.
None.
Ms. Chima?
No.
Candace? Okay. In that case, may I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items 13.1 through 13.10?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
None.
Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, so the last item on the board is any board consensus item we have updates on or any new items to add. Let's start with the updates first, if there are any.
I don't think, we're still moving forward with our communication mechanism for our clean bathrooms at Logan, still hoping to have that fully implemented by the start of the new calendar year. And I think that's it, right? Everything else has been updated.
So, I have been asking about the numbers, our EDA numbers. Do you have that?
The enrollment at
Okay,
sites.
the ADA numbers for CBIT. Yeah, our CalPADS numbers show us to be slightly above what we projected. So it's still down overall, but in terms of how we built our budget,
That's
it
very
looks
good
like,
news.
depends on how you look at it one way or the other, but more or less we anticipate being, about 20 to 30 students above what we projected in the budget, which is really good news.
Yeah, thank you. That's it.
Okay, I just have one thing. I know we just all experienced an earthquake recently. And I'm just curious as to, I know a lot of our buildings are old. Are we by law required to retrofit any of our buildings to meet the safety of this earthquake?
You know, I'll tell you what, this is actually, it fits perfectly with the presentation we're hoping to bring forward on the status of our safety and facilities. I'm sure that it had to have been done in the facilities audit that was part of the facilities master plan and part of our bond planning. And we can definitely, when we come forward, what we really need to do is reevaluate where we are. We'll present to you what our findings are about safety in general, and we'll include seismic safety as part of that, and then come up with some recommendations about moving forward with the bond priorities. So we can mesh that in perfectly.
Yeah, you
that'd
can.
be good, actually.
Yeah, you can bring that, maybe do some research and bring that information. But my understanding is as long as you don't touch the building, you don't have to retrofit it.
But we probably should. It's not if we have to, I mean, for the safety of
Because
our...
you said there is a regulation.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no
if
regulation.
there's no
but yes.
regulation, okay,
Right.
it would be, yeah, so
Yeah.
I think if we have the means, we should definitely do it.
Right, of course.
Yeah, that'll be part of our, we'll do, it'll be mesh with the bond update too. So we'll put that all together soon, actually. I'm hoping, well, we'll see. I don't want to overcommit, but very,
Sure.
very soon.
Thank you. Any other items? All right.
Last comment I would like to say to our students, I forgot at the time that because of these hoaxes or some of the graffiti we are having in our buildings, we depend upon our student leaders. So if you can share that message through the social media or whatever the way you have, or talking to people that look, we are all together. If somebody has a problem, please come to us and talk to us. So you are ambassadors.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. With no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Okay, good night.